cold. And second of all, we were all crammed into 2 lanes, so I always had somebody on my tail trying to get around me. The reason we had to use 2 lanes was because swim practice was at the same time as the water jazz class. I actually tried to convince Dad to let me do water jazz instead of swim team, but he wouldn't go for it. Come on, ladies, get those arms up. This was the first summer the coach let us boys wear swimming trunks instead of those skimpy racing trunks. But Mom said Rodrick's hand-me-down bathing suit was perfectly fine. She said, "Your friends will be jealous because you'll be so fast." All he did was laugh at me. After swim practice, Rodrick would pick me up in his band's van. Mom had this crazy idea that if me and Rodrick spent quality time on the ride home every day, we wouldn't fight as much. But all it did was make things a lot worse. Rodrick was always a half-hour late picking me up. And he wouldn't let me sit up front. He said that chlorine would ruin his seat, even though the van is something like 15 years old. Get in the back. Rodrick's van doesn't actually have any seats in the back, so I had to squeeze in with all the band equipment. And every time the van came to a stop, I had to pray I didn't get my head taken off by one of Rodrick's drums. Screech! I ended up walking home every day instead of getting a ride from Rodrick. I figured it was better to just walk the 2 miles than to get brain damage riding in the back of that van. Halfway through the summer, I decided I was pretty much done with swim team, so I came up with a trick to get out of practice. I'd swim a few laps and then ask the coach if I could use the bathroom. Then I'd just hide out in the locker room until practice was over. The only problem with my plan was that it was something like 0 degrees in the boys' bathroom, so it was even colder in there than it was in the pool. Shiver, shiver, shiver. I had to wrap myself up in toilet paper so I didn't get hypothermia. That's how I spent a pretty big chunk of my summer holidays, and that's why I'm actually looking forward to going back to school tomorrow. Tuesday. When I got to school today, everybody was acting all strange around me, and at first, I didn't know what was up. I was just standing there, and they'd all go, "Scream!" and run away. Ah! Then I remembered I still had the cheese touch from last year. I got the cheese touch in the last week of school, and over the summer, I completely forgot about it. The problem with the cheese touch is that you've got it until you can pass it on to someone else. But nobody would even get within 30 feet of me, so I knew I was going to be stuck with the cheese touch for the whole school year. Luckily, there was a new kid named Jeremy Pindle in homeroom. So that took care of that problem. "Welcome to our school, Jeremy." Slap. That took care of the cheese touch. My first class was pre-algebra, and the teacher put me right next to Alex Aruda, the smartest kid in the whole class. Alex is super easy to copy from because he always finishes his test early and puts his paper down on the floor next to him. So, if I ever get in a pinch, it's nice to know I can count on Alex to bail me out. Kids whose last names start with the first few letters of the alphabet get called on the most by the teacher, and that's why they end up being the smartest. Some people think that's not true, but if you want to come down to my school, I can prove it. Alex Aruda, really smart. Christopher Ziegel, not so smart. I can only think of one kid who broke the last name rule, and that's Peter Utiger. Peter was the smartest kid in the class all the way up until the 5th grade. That's when a bunch of us started giving him a hard time about how his initials sounded when you said them out loud.